Assassin's Creed is here, so we are going over the most popular, the most powerful commanders from this set.
I'm Mia, and I collect portable batteries.
I'm BZ. I've never played an Assassin's Creed game, but my friend did in high school. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Dragon Shield, because they have the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
I bet you weren't expecting that. Just like you weren't expecting me to say Card Kingdom is the best way to go by singles, doubles, triples, or any sealed product online, because when you spend $50 or more on the site, you get free shipping. And when you use the Nitpicking Nerds link in the description, they know that Nitpicking Nerds sent you. And then that way, you're supporting yourself by getting great deals on the website and supporting us, because that tells them that you found them through us, and it's perfect.
And then you can see our faces on their website too. We're also sponsored by Moxfield. It's going to be somewhere in the video, but you can't guess where it is because you're a liar. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield. I know that was mentioned earlier, but they are sending us to Amsterdam, and we are so thankful for it. So if you want to play a game with us or hang out with us or get something signed, you should go by the Dragon Shield Beckett booth at MagicCon Amsterdam.
And if you're thinking about supporting us, go to Patreon, because that gives us money directly, and you get to see podcasts, gameplay, basically a bunch of stuff that we can't make on YouTube goes over there. And I think it's pretty interesting. We're about to record a podcast for the month of June, right about after this.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
So we've gathered the most powerful commanders from the Assassin's Creed Universes Beyond product. Even if you're not into the game Assassin's Creed, there's a bunch of cards that are relevant here that you might play against, that you might want to build with. So we're going to go over the most popular commanders, the most powerful ones, in our opinion, and then give you just a little bit of a breakdown, a little bit of a deep dive into them. We're going to start with Cassandra, Eagle Bearer, 1 red-white for a 2/2 haste. When she enters the battlefield, search your graveyard, hand, and library for a card named the Spear of Leonidas, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Whenever a creature you control with legendary equipment attached to it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So before we can finish analyzing this card, we have to read the Spear of Leonidas, because she puts it right into play. It's 2 and a red for a legendary artifact equipment. Whenever equipped creature attacks, choose 1. It either gains double strike, you make a 3/2 legendary horse, or you discard 2, then draw 2. Notably, that is the better order, because if you have no cards in hand, you will discard 2, then draw up to 2 cards in hand. And it is equip for 2. So that is a lot of things. This is an equipment commander, legendary equipment, and it comes down really, really early on turn 3.
I really like this because I feel like when you have Boros equipment commanders, one of the things they struggle with most is card draw. So to be able to have it on the equipment that it tutors up and also on the commander itself, plus it has haste, so if you have anything cheaper that's a legendary equipment and you could put it on immediately, it would be a really good way to just get some card advantage early in the game.
Yeah, so the first thing that this card makes me think of is I want to come out of the gate swinging on turn 3. If this is my commander, I want to see if I can auto-equip the Spear of Leonidas ASAP, and on turn 3, attack with it to then give it double strike with the spear and draw 2 cards off of Cassandra's ability. So there's a couple ways to do that. Obviously, we're like really pressed, because turn 3, we have to spend all of our mana on Cassandra. So we only have 2 mana from turn 2 and 1 mana from turn 1 to set this up. But we have Sigarda's Aid. When equipments enter, they auto-attach. So on turn 3, we can play this on turn 1 or 2. Then she hits turn 3, auto-attaches, give it double strike, draw 2 cards right away. That's such a sweet swing.
It's just so important to be able to put it on as soon as possible. I feel like if you wait till turn 4, you kind of lose a lot of the momentum that this commander is built into. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about that. It's a lot less impressive when you draw 2 cards on turn 4 with your 2/2. It might be harder to connect. And then if you get it going on turn 3, turn 4 is when you can suit it up, so now they can't block it, like she's a 5/5 or something with something else. We also have Frodo. He can equip small equipment to himself. So if we play him on turn 2, use Cassandra turn 3 to bring out the spear, then we can attack with Frodo, attach the spear, and we won't get double strike or any of the triggers from it, but we will get to draw a card with Cassandra.
I think that's just most important overall, to be able to accrue that early advantage. It's just, I feel like that's the thing that sputters out equipment decks to begin with, the high equip cost, especially if you're building them on like a budget or something, because you need the time to set that up, and it's not like this has trample, it's not like it's big, it's not like it has built-in evasion.
Yeah. So we have the card draw, and then we just need to give the creatures a little bit of oomph. And the spear does do that with creating creatures for you to equip later with the horse or giving double strike. Also, Fervent Champion's kind of a weird one. It's a 1 mana 1/1 with haste, and equipped abilities that target it cost 3 less. So the spear will equip to it for free. We play the champion on turn 1, Cassandra on turn 3, equip spear, attack. I think this thing has some, I think it has first strike, so it'll be even harder to block, and we're going to get triggers off of it.
I mean, it's just good to have options in general, because even if you can't get the commander damage train started, at least you're getting the card draw started.
Yeah, and you can't just have Sigarda's Aid and hope that you draw that one in however many games. Like, having multiple redundant ways to get this thing going super early is, I think, what's going to put you farther ahead than some of the other Cassandra decks out there. We also have cards that will get you the Cassandra triggers on turn 4 with free equipment. We don't ever want to pay the 2 to equip the spear. We want to just get that for free. So Brunor Battlehammer pumps up our equipped creatures already, then makes the equipment attach for 0, and it just gives us this huge swing that people probably weren't expecting, and this can just be make for some like nasty turns.
I mean, the big stats, the double strike that the spear is going to give you with the commander that can swing immediately, depending on what order you play these in, maybe it'll just be better to play your commander a little bit later and then swing immediately. Pure Steel Paladin is also another way to equip for 0. This is a little bit later, granted, but I still think that this is necessary in these types of decks.
Yeah, there are universes where if you've got like 0 cost things, you could use the Pure Steel metal craft ability on turn 3, maybe with an artifact land or 2. You can get that going. So that could be another way if you lean really hard into artifacts. But mostly, I think of this as like a mid to late game card where it's going to turn on all your stuff. You can get in with one huge creature or move around all your legendary equipment so that each of them is going to start drawing you cards. And then we have Arden. Arden can just auto-attach stuff. This is a no-brainer for equipment decks. Every equipment deck pretty much has this thing. So you're going to attach all the stuff to all your things, get all the triggers, and it's going to be great. We're going to move on to some legendary equipments because we can't just rely on the Spear of Leonidas. We have to actually get some other stuff in. I'm sure this deck's going to be packed with them. What are some of the ones that you think?
I think Sword of the Animist is a really good one because you're going to want to have lands. I mean, Boros is not the best at getting lands onto the field, but if you want to have legendary equipment that actually helps you ramp a little, this is the best way to do it, along with Bitterthorn, Nissa's Animist.
Yeah, can you imagine opening up like turn 1 Fervent Champion, turn 2 Sword of the Animist, equip for free, and now you just have like rampant growth on a stick every turn? I think there's some really powerful starts that this deck can have, because all that is before you even play Cassandra and then get the Spear and then give Double Strike and like who knows what's happening after that. But I just love all this stuff, and Bitterthorn's so funny because it's a legendary equipment that fuels itself. It's already got a creature, you just need to attack with it.
Yeah, I think it feels so good to be like, okay, ramping because you don't actually get to do that normally in Boros, and then card draw and ramping in the same type with Boros. That's just like an amazing way to get the game started.
Yeah, big fan. Also, Hammer of Nazan is another one. It auto-attaches all your equipment, including itself, and it just gives nice bonuses throughout the game, and it just saves you mana, because all these legendary equipment, they're good if we can get them for free. Some of these are a little clunky if we have to constantly pay 3 mana to move these things over.
I think that's just the downside of equipments in general, so you need little cheats here and there to make sure that you can actually move your equipment to where it's necessary and not just stack it all on one thing.
Oh yeah, we got cheats. Don't worry about that. Shadow Spear is a very cheap legendary equipment that can just give Trample lifelink, some nice evasion, because when we want to deal combat damage, Trample can let our big thing spill over through a chump blocker and still give us a card.
Plus, just Shadow Spear, not that it's used that often, but the losing hexproof might actually come in handy at some point.
It really is 100% tacked on for free. So in that scenario, I just love it. It's great to have. I'm not saying it'll be useful, like you said, like 1% of the time.
But that 1%.
It's there for free. We're not paying any cost just having that ability tacked on. I also like Lost GT because it's a 1-mana thing. You equip for 1, and now you can untap lands later when the GT gets counters on it. It's just super efficient. It's really cheap. It almost asks nothing of you.
I love the fact that the counters go on the GT too, so no matter what creature you have it on, you can utilize that ability. It's not stuck to the creature that's equipped to. Plus, Embercleave is a great one in here. That's just like a insta-kill if you have it at the right time.
Oh, I mean, Embercleave is, of course, a staple in any equipment deck for Commander. It's legendary, which is just a bonus. We were going to play this thing anyway. We're going to ride this thing to victory. It'll probably be one of our slam dunk win conditions if we get through commander damage, or if we just have like a 10-10 laying around. Now it attacks for what, 22?
I'm excited to see commander damage coming back into play with like new sets. I feel like it's been a little bit foregoed in recent sets as they try to like bring out things that are a little bit more popular and that, or just newer. And I'm just really excited to see it on a commander. This is like the good old days.
It's the good old days. 2012 call. They want some Boros equipment. We also have some support for Cassandra. Obviously, we need to like tie it all together. I like Open the Armory. It just tutors for any aura or equipment. In this case, just equipment that we're going to need, and it helps put it in our hand. Never tutor for the Spear of Leonidas. You get that for free.
You just have that attached to your commander. Inventory management from Fallout lets you at split second just attach equipments wherever you want for 2 mana. That's like a really great way to like in response to you killing my big suited up creature type deal.
Yeah, or if I attack you with 3 things and you block 2 of them, I'll move all the equipment onto the one you didn't block, and you're taking all that damage.
And if you want your creatures to attack really fast, Rising of the Day gives everything haste and a little bit of a stat buff, but it comes down really early too.
I think if it's going to help surprise players and help you recover from board wipes, because you've got all these equipment sitting here now, and when you draw a card and you have to play a creature from your hand, if you don't have equipment that gives haste, then you're just stuck there. So I think having 1 or 2 of these in addition to haste equipment will help you get out the gates faster. And I also love Legion leadership in this deck. because it's a Boros MDFC, so we were probably going to play it anyway, but it doubles a creature's power, which is great, actually. It's better than Double Strike because we have other cards that are going to give Double Strike by themselves. So when you like Ember Cleave your commander and then double its power, it's just attacking for like a bajillion. And I love the fact that this comes on a dual land, tapped land. There's no downside for this card. It's so good in a Cassandra deck.
You thought we were going to get more than one commander without mentioning an MDFC. You were wrong.
You were absolutely wrong. Who is our next commander from Assassin's Creed?
Our next commander is Cleopatra, Exiled Pharaoh. 2 green black for a 2/4. At the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter of each up to 2 other target legendary creatures. Whenever a legendary creature with counters on it dies, draw a card for each counter on it, and you lose 2 life.
There's a lot going on here. This kind of wants you to pump up your own other legendary creatures. However, that is not mandatory. You could pump other legendary creatures. You can pump your opponent's legendary creatures if you plan to kill them with Cleopatra, and if you put other type of negative counters on your opponent's creatures, that will still count for her second ability because she doesn't care whose legendary creatures are dying. So you can go this route of like, I have all the stuff, I'm going to sacrifice my stuff, and you can kind of play a little bit into, well, I'm going to kill your commanders. Like, you better not even play them because they're going to be bad for you.
I also like the fact that it is not just 1/1 counters or poison or whatever. It just says whenever a counter. So if you have like some shield counters or some weird type of counters, you can also rock with that.
Yeah, so obviously this deck wants a million legendary creatures to support Cleopatra. There's a couple ones that are very, very fitting, like Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, enters with counters on it. That's already great. Even if this was just a 3/3 that had 3 counters on it and was legendary, Cleopatra would see that. She would Rayhan would die. We draw 3 and lose 2 life. But when Rayhan or other things die, they put counters elsewhere. And with also Grakma, a card you literally forgot about as soon as it was spoiled, it's just another 3-mana 3/3 with counters that can redistribute counters a little bit. So like, these are perfect.
Rishkar is a mana dork that can put counters on other things and have them tap for mana because they have counters on them. I feel like that's just perfect for this deck.
Yeah, because now you've got all the little buttons and knobs to turn. It's like, well, now my creatures tap for mana thanks to Rishkar. So I can basically take an extra turn with all the extra resources that I have. And I also think of Mazarek, Kral, Death Priest. If you're sacrificing dudes, as we will get to in a second, it's going to boost your whole team. They have now more counters on them. So even if your opponents find a board wipe, you can still just draw cards. It's really, really good. The only thing is that it's not a May. So if you have like 20 creatures with 20 counters on them, just make sure you also have a sack outlet for Cleopatra, because then you can just say, nope, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, though you lose 2 life is not mandatory either.
Also true.
Or it is mandatory. That was my bad. And I feel like just Yawgmoth is perfect in here. It can put the counters on things. It can put extra counters on things so you can draw more. And it's just a pretty cheap ability in general.
Yeah, it's got the sack outlet that we want as a bailout for Cleopatra, or to sacrifice our legends to draw more cards. It can put negative counters on our opponent's things, killing their commanders and drawing us cards, or it can discard cards to proliferate if we need more power and toughness. I don't think Yawgmoth, there's nothing he doesn't do. He's perfect.
He's a perfect man. But if we want to put counters on things, we want to put a lot of counters on them. One of them is Winding Constrictor. This is going to put an extra counter onto things when you put counters on them already. So you're going to be able to draw double the cards when these things die.
Yeah, Cleopatra end step already is going to put 2 counters. So if you have Winding Constrictor and some legendaries and Cleopatra, all of a sudden when she puts those counters on the other legendaries, it's 2 instead of 1. So you get 4 counters instead of 2. Curse Wombat, it's basically the same thing. It's like a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to round up and say it's the same thing.
And if you want MDFCs, Revitalizing Repast is the Golgari one from MH3.
I'm
I was
sorry.
going to say MDFC instead.
Did you think that we weren't going to mention an MDFC? It just so happens that this 2-color deck also really wants its 2-color MDFC. We didn't talk as much in our MH3 set videos about the 2-colored ones. They are still very good. They're just harder to play, so it wasn't. They're not as auto-includey, but it's still. I mean, it's just an absolute slam dunk here. And Vraska joins up. Super funny. Legendary payoff to draw cards, and it puts a death touch counter on our dudes, which makes them harder to block, which works with the rest of Vraska joins up. But it's also another counter. Even if our creature has 2 +1/+1 counters and 1 death touch counter and it dies, we get to draw 3.
I feel like some of the sets recently have just been like hand in hand in hand, and this is like a really good example of that.
I think there's just been so much legendary payoff. Like Outlaws of Thunder Junction, it's a ton of legendary matters stuff with all of the like joins up enchantments.
Yeah.
And then now Assassin's Creed has got big focus on legendary.
I mean, I feel like just in general, they're like, how many crossover episodes can we do? Well, they're all legendary, so we have to have some sort of payoff. It really feels like a Joda crossover special.
The Joda crossover special. Okay, so if we want to sacrifice, if you want to go the route of sacrificing investing with Cleopatra to get cards, you want some small legends. I think Bristly Bill is one of the perfect ones. It's only a 2 mana investment. As you play fetch lands and regular lands and ramp, he puts counters for Cleopatra on creatures, and then later it's totally fine to just sacrifice poor Bill, get some cards out of him.
I know people were really hyped about him as a commander when OTJ came out, but I do like the fact that he can be in the 99 and still be very effective.
Yeah, Grist Voracious Larva is a 1-drop legend. You can just play this because it's 1 mana and is legendary. Seriously, I think that's good enough. You want to follow, like when you play Cleopatra on turn 4, you want to get counters. So that means on turn 1, 2, and 3, you have to play 2 legends, preferably, right?
Yeah.
So you want some 1 mana ones in there to make it easier on your curve. And like, who cares? Sometimes you're going to reanimate something with Grist, it'll be fine. It's a 1 mana legend with upside.
And you also just, when you have these earlier legends out for when your commander is out, you want something that's kind of easy to die. So it's like, okay, chump block with Grist. It had like a counter on it of some sort. Oh, wait, I can just draw now? Cool.
Yeah, exactly. And then Valentine, forget the backside. I don't think you're going to be gaining life. Valentine's just a 1 mana 1/1 menace, and he actually has a little bit of like hate built in, where like your creature's opponents control like die into exile, and you might get pests off of it, which is pretty cool. So Valentine is another perfect addition. You know, maybe you even want to consider Ashnod, Flesh Mechanist. Just get the 1-drop legends in so you can bump them all up, and go to moxfield.com where you can tag all of the 1-drop legends, 2-drop legends. It makes it really easy to build a Cleopatra deck or any deck online.
Set yourself up for success with Moxfield. You can see your entire curve on there. How many 1-drops, 2-drops, 3-drops can you put in your deck before you play your commander on turn 4?
It also tells you the percentage chance you have to play a 3-drop on curve. It tells you at the bottom there's like a bunch of graphs and stats that you can very much use to get better with your deck and better at Magic in general. It'll say you have a 95% chance of casting a 3-drop on turn 3, and that's very helpful information, especially as you get higher on the curve.
I really like that. It helps me see, oh, am I running too many lands, not enough lands in here? It's just very helpful to have.
Next, we're going to move to our third Assassin's Creed commander, Sean and Rebecca Agents. I don't know what they're agents of. Let me know in the comments. 1 blue, white, green for a 4/4 vigilance. When they enter the battlefield, search your graveyard, hand, and library for a card named the Animus and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle, and all they do is tap for a colorless and mill 2 cards. Now, the Animus is a card they bring out every game, so this is kind of our secret commander. It's a 2-mana artifact at the beginning of your end step. Exile up to 1 target legendary creature card from a graveyard with a memory counter on it, and taps until your next turn. Target legendary creature you control becomes a copy of target creature card in exile with a memory counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So we are going to be exiling legendary creatures from graveyards, and then later at sorcery speed turning our creatures into legendary creatures. However, the creatures we turn into legendary creatures have to already be legendary. So we're just going to play all legends. We won't have to think about it. It'll be fine. And then we're going to get some really cool value out of it.
I really like this commander. This is really cool to be able to turn your creatures just into different legendary creatures, especially if they have really nice combat triggers on them.
Yeah, there's a couple really small legends that we can play out early and then copy larger memory legends onto. I don't know how to say that. I'm sure I'll figure it out as we go. But like the reality chip, it's a nice artifact. You might have a lot of artifacts in this deck. I could see that being the way you go. But either way, late game you can equip it, that's fine. But early game it's just a legendary creature to paint a better legendary creature on later.
Yoshimaru Ever Faithful. This is the cutest little dog that you can put into the graveyard really, really early. It's like kill the dog really early.
Oh, I was thinking you don't kill the dog and you make him into another legendary that you kill instead, because when as you play the game, he'll get a bunch of counters, and then when he becomes a copy of like a bigger legend, he keeps all the counters. So you really want to put something. You might make him into something else. It'll have like 6 counters on it. And now it's huge.
I wouldn't want you to kill the dog.
You're the one who suggested it. I don't know.
I'm just saying, K9 Mark 1, another dog that will give your stuff Ward 1. And if you tap it, creatures can't be blocked, or a certain creature can't be blocked.
Yeah, so just don't hurt these dogs. I don't know what Mia was saying. Leave the dogs alone because they are perfect, and we're going to turn them into bigger, scarier dogs. We also have Fibblethip the Lost. He does have that ability that when he gets targeted by a spell to go back into your deck and hide. But that doesn't work with the Animus. Animus won't do that. It's because it's an ability, not a spell. So we just play him, draw a card, forget he ever existed until we can put a legendary, take a memory legend and turn him into that and then attack a couple times with it.
Poor guy. You're not even doing the thing that he wants you to do.
No, we are not losing him. Fibblethip, I found you now. I won't lose you again.
But if you want to fill the graveyard, how about a creature that also is BZ's secret commander, but not so commander? It's Takasia Digsite Mentor, which is the shell of a certain other
Yes,
commander.
This is an artifact deck. I have it in an enchantment deck for the memes, but this is a very good artifact commander. It can bring back all your dead artifacts like K9 and the chip and whatever else you have in there. And it's like surveilling 1 on all of your team while giving vigilance is super nice. And it lets you put big legendary creatures in the graveyard to turn your little legends into later for a whole turn.
Perpetual Timepiece, another one of BZ's favorites, is in here. It helps you mill, and if your library is running a little too low, you can shuffle your graveyard back into your library.
Is this not one of your favorites?
I mean,
I love it.
I like it. It's not. I don't put it into as many decks as you do, though.
But we really do want legends in our graveyard, and Bant's colors are a little weird to mill with sometimes. Green's good. Like we have Shigeki, Jukai Visionary, but sometimes it can be tricky. So I like Perpetual Timepiece, but Shigeki's also great. He ramps you as the game goes on, and he doesn't get back legends with his last ability, but I don't think that's that big of a problem. The front side is already great, and he fills the graveyard too. So having to be able to get back instants and sorceries and things that can't be legendary, that's totally fine. That's still a really good ability.
Shigeki's just so good. It's just really cheap both in money like type and also mana. And then just being able to have double utility is so nice to have on a body.
Yeah, and we've built up to this long enough. We got to figure out what are the legends that we want to mill over, exile with the Animus, and then turn our Yoshimaru into. First one's got to be Galta and Maverin. Can you imagine Yoshimaru with like 8 counters on it? Make it a 12-12, so now it's a 20-20. Get the attack trigger. Get a bunch of vampires or a dinosaur if you attack with something else.
Galta and Maverin's just so big, and it's just so destructive. If this goes onto the field, especially earlier than anticipated, wow, that you are just going to take over the game.
There's also Avacyn, Angel of Hope. It makes a legendary creature a copy of the thing until your next turn. So you can turn it into Fibblethip into Avacyn for the rest of the turn.
And then if you have a good board wipe that just says destroy, you can just make sure everyone else's stuff gets destroyed instead of yours.
Yeah, it totally offsets the clunkiness that Avacyn usually has with that, because you have to play an 8-mana card and then somehow play a board wipe. But with this, all you have to do is tap the Animus, and then now you've spent 0 mana so far. It's a free ability, and then you play a board wipe.
I love Avacyn. I'm happy that's a little bit more playable with this artifact. There's also the original Praetors, Vorinclex, Elshmar, and Jin in these colors. I mean, they are usually so clunky at the 8 mana, 7 mana sides, but if you can get them down on a Fibblethip or something, that makes it way easier.
Yeah, Vorinclex will double your mana for the turn, and since you have spent 0 so far just by tapping the Animus, that's really, really good. Elvish Norn can wipe your opponent's boards, give you a huge attack that same turn, and Jin-Gitaxias, since the creature stays a clone, a copy, until your next turn, you get the full effect of Jin-Gitaxias. You get to draw 7, they all lose their hands if it survives, and even if it doesn't survive, you can just keep making legendary creatures into these creatures. Even if someone Source of Plowshares your fake Fibblethip, just turn the next legend into Elish Norn. You have to answer the Animus, and even if you do, if we replay Sean and Rebecca, the Animus comes back from our graveyard.
I love that. That is just so funky, and it's not like they can really touch anything exiled with a memory counter either. So
yeah, that's just kind of
so it just kind of like gets around all of the removal that you might find with it.
All right, next up, we're going to go to Ezio Auditore de Firenze. This is the Assassin Commander. It's 1 and a black for 3/2 menace. Assassin spells you cast have free running black, which means you can cast a spell for a free running cost if you dealt damage to a player with an assassin or your commander. In this case, that's the same thing. Whenever Ezio deals combat damage to a player, you can pay Wooburg if that player has 10 or less life. When you do, that player loses the game. We want a lot of assassins. We want to put people's life total to 10, and then we want to finish them off.
I feel like Ezio is one of the most notable assassins of Assassin's Creed 2.
I know who he is, yeah.
So I'm very excited to see him as like the Wooburg assassin commander, just like kind of the head of it all. Plus, it was the most hyped up one. At least it was the only one that I really heard a lot of hype for.
Yeah, so we know that we want to play a bunch of assassins, so we might as well pay him off. We have Ramses, which is the one that says if somebody loses the game, if you hit them with an assassin, they just lose. Etrada lets you do a bunch of funky stuff with assassins. Layla Hassan is going to get historic stuff back from your graveyard. So like when all these assassins just keep coming down and hitting and getting cast for a free running cost, it just gives you all this incremental advantage.
I love seeing types that are not as supported get more support in general, and this is a great just way to bring all these assassins together. There was Mary the Killing Quill as one of the main assassin commanders usually.
It was before, yeah.
But I'm happy to see that it has a place in the 99 because I never thought it was that great as a commander itself.
I think she could do work though, but she didn't have any support. But now there's a bunch of playable assassins. And Double Down, this might be a card you want to keep your eye on. This is the card from Thunder Junction that copies outlaw spells, and assassins are part of that little stew. So this kind of just says copy all your assassins. It's as good in assassins as like Necro Duality would be in zombies. So you might want to get this.
All the outlaw spells came at the right time right before this. Just do remember what the assassin or the outlaw types are, because it's like mercenary, warlock,
assassin,
assassin,
and pirate.
If you're playing any other outlaw spells, make sure you can support it, along with if it says like destroy target non-outlaw, make sure your opponent's things are also not outlaws.
Yeah, exactly. So since Ezio's got a lot of moving pieces. He wants to like pay Wooburg, deal combat damage, and then there's the free running ability. So we want to play expensive assassins in our deck to cast them for black. So we can play like Roshan, Hidden Magistrate. This is not in and of itself an expensive assassin, but it turns every creature in your deck into assassins. So now you could just cheat out any creature you want for black.
That just makes it really, really smart. I mean, I feel like that's such a good assassin ability, right? That's just so thematic, just hiding in the shadows, and then you cheat it out and just hit like really easily with it.
This is the Maskwood Nexus of assassins. There's also Calidus Assassin. It is an assassin, but it enters as a clone of anything. So you can get black for whatever clone of whatever creature, and even kills the original just in case, because this town ain't big enough for the two of us.
I'm so happy that this has support. I'm just usually when it gets support, it doesn't get that much. This is just giving so much support.
Yeah, we also have Thraxamundar. It's not even that good, but it is a 7-mana assassin, so I just had to mention it. And Vein Ripper. Vein Ripper is an absolute banger. Now when anything dies, you get to zap somebody for 2. It's kind of hard to pay that ward, so I think Vein Ripper is probably one of your better assassins, and I didn't even know it was an assassin until I made this video.
Vein Ripper's going to put in so much damage. But we want to get people to 10 life, so then we can pay Wooburg after hitting with Ezio and then just killing someone. So Soren Markov is one of the best ways to do that. I feel like Soren used to be the boogeyman at one point. I was nervous at Soren when I first came around because I'm like, oh no, 10 life? That's so much life to lose. And now he is back and he is playable in these decks.
And even though this is a Wooburg deck, you're going to be heavy black because of that free running cost that Ezio gives. So this fits right in. And also Magister Sphinx is just another way to set someone's life just straight up to 10. It's like a little clunky, but you could also do the Ezio thing, right? If you have Rashad, you could make this an assassin, cast it for 2 mana, and then set someone's life to 10 and kill them next turn.
Life gain decks beware. It doesn't matter how much you gain anymore if you could just get set to 10.
No one is safe. So we already had one historical figure in Cleopatra. Let's add a second one with Leonardo da Vinci, the man himself. 2 and a blue for a 3/3. You can pay 3 blue, and until end of turn, Thopters you control have base power and toughness XX, where X is the number of cards in your hand, and you can pay 2 and a blue and tap them to loot. Then, if the discarded card was an artifact card, you exile it from your graveyard, and if you do, you get a copy that says 0/2 Thopter. That's also whatever it was, but it's also a 0/2 Thopter creature. So he can make Thopters. If you pitch really big artifacts, he can clone them for very cheap because he's only 3 mana to do that, to activate. And then once you get a bunch of little Thopters, if you want to go that route, he can overrun them if you have like 9 cards in your hand.
You just got to make sure you are drawing enough, you have all the right resources. But I think Thopters are really cute, so this is a cool way to take it.
Can you name what's your favorite Thopter?
I just like the tokens, the ones that like Tezzeret makes, for instance.
All right, more specifically, if you had to name the first Thopter on our list.
Oh, Ornithopter of Paradise.
Either one. You can play the Ornithopter to just up your Thopter count. I don't know if that's good. It seems kind of janky, but you certainly could. But Ornithopter of Paradise is going to ramp you, and it's perfect.
He's so cute, and just making mana of any color. Plus, he's a pretty good defense of anything that's just like a 1/1 coming down turn 2, just hoping to hit. You're not going to be able to get in with like poison things, for instance. Thopter Spy Network also helps you make Thopters and draw cards. And this is just 4 mana also. So this comes down really easily and helps you go along with your game plan.
When you connect with Thopters, you draw cards, and that's great because you then want to make more Thopters and draw more cards. Also, Liberator is a Thopter, and it can give you flash, make your deck a little bit trickier. And I wanted to include one of my favorite, like, not technically Thopter, but kind of Thopter cards, Intrude on the Mind. It's like a Factor Fiction, but you make a Thopter just in the middle of it, and then it gets a couple counters on it. So don't play Factor Fiction, play Intrude on the Mind, because it's like might be the Thopter that you forget.
Foth plus Thopters.
Thopter. Thopter. What about like turning really powerful artifacts into 0/2 Thopters with his other ability?
We can definitely do that. One of the ways to make powerful Thopters is with Portal to Phyrexia. Portal to Phyrexia is always so backbreaking, you know what I mean?
What if it was a 3 mana 0/2 Thopter? Would it be backbreaking then?
Oh, absolutely. It's the effect, not the body.
Absolutely.
Just having everyone sacrifice creatures and then bringing them back for yourself, that's nasty. And it's usually such a big cost to set up because it's like 9 mana, but being able to do it way quicker than that if it's in your graveyard, I like that.
Yeah, you do end up with the 0/2 Thopter is more killable than regular Portal to Phyrexia, but you also only spent 3 mana on it, and you got the ETB right away. There's also Graz, Unstoppable Juggernaut, which is going to turn all your other creatures, which are probably Thopters, into 5/3s at their base stats. So who cares that this Thopter is a 0/2? This Graz Thopter is going to make everything into 5/3s, and you can just overrun and win right there.
It's also not blocked by walls, right?
I think so. You know what? Maybe. And then there's Reaver Titan. It's a vehicle, but you're going to overwrite that into a 0/2 Thopter, and when it attacks, each opponent takes 5 damage. So this is like the little Thopter that could.
That is just what every Thopter dreams of. I like this.
Every
That's
Thopter
really
dreams
funny.
of becoming a Reaver Titan one day.
Just swinging in and be like, all right, well, I'm a 0/2, but you're still taking 5.
Yeah, I'll deal 15 damage.
But if we want extra Thopter tokens, how are we going to get them? Well, one of them is playing clones. Specifically, Phyrexian Metamorph is a great one in here because it's an artifact and it just clones anything on the field.
Yeah, most of the tokens that we're going to be making with Leonardo da Vinci, they're going to be really, really strong 0/2 tokens. So if we can find a way to make more of that and then skip the whole activate Leonardo next turn and discard something else, and we just get the same thing over and over. We just Phyrexian Metamorph one of our Thopters that's a 0/2 like powerhouse. Same is true of Echo Storm. Since it's an artifact, every time we cast Leonardo, we get to copy Echo Storm again, and just like, oh, I really like that first portal to Phyrexia. Here's like 4 more. How do you lose from there?
I've had a field with multiple portals from BZ, and it is so devastating every single time.
It starts to get really silly when you reanimate, 4 creatures every turn. There's just no beating that. You have to wipe the Thopters away. But we're going to move to our next commander. This is Altair Ibn Lahad. He's white, black, red for a 3/3 first strike. When Altair attacks, exile up to 1 target assassin creature card from your graveyard with a memory counter on it. Memory counters are back. Then for each creature card you own and exile with a memory counter on it, create a tapped attacking token that's a copy of it. Exile those tokens at end of combat. So Altair makes tokens, but as the game goes on and he attacks more, and you maybe play other cards that we'll mention in a second to put other memory counters on things, that just continuously snowballs, and this card gets really, really annoying.
This is just army in a can, right? This is another spicy Mardu commander, and I'm stopping myself from building another one.
So the number one thing that you want in this deck before anything else is the Animus, because this exiles cards from your graveyard with memory counters on it, and then Altair later can just make basically twice as many.
At least the set plays into each other like really well. I hate sets that don't really do that, so I like the fact that it's like you can just pick and choose and still make a really good deck out of the cards within the set.
Yeah.
But you want assassins in the graveyard, and if you don't have the Animus, one of the ways to do that is bury alive. You just want to tutor up your best ones and toss them into the graveyard.
Then Altair can exile them and you're off to the races. Same is true with Incarnation Technique. You might not be a full-on Reanimator deck with this, but you are going to have big creatures that you want in play. So if you don't have your commander out, you can just reanimate them and then they're in play anyway. And if you do have your commander out, reanimate some utility creatures, take the good ones with memory counters, and now you can spam them over and over.
I mean, just aim the other replicate part at the person who's just playing like Spellslinger or something. They're not going to be able to do as much cool things as you're doing.
Yeah, demonstrate for them.
And one of my favorite cards, Breach the Multiverse, is going to be amazing in this deck. It gives you the mill. It's going to reanimate something from everyone, and it's going to have that late game payoff that's going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, Altar of Dementia, if you've got little cheap doofuses in this deck, you can sacrifice them to mill yourself to help fill the graveyard so that you can get really, really good tokens. There are some bangers in this deck when you want to turn your other cards into assassin. I mentioned Roshan earlier, and Maskwood Nexus is the other one. It makes everything assassins. So now you can choose from any creature in your graveyard to then make more copies of them.
Maskwood Nexus just got a reprint too, so it is a little bit cheaper than usual, so it would be great to pick up. The Master Multiplied is also great in here because you can't sacrifice or exile tokens, which means you can keep them with your commander.
Yeah, you get to keep them for multiple uses, and then Altair can just keep making more of them over time as long as they're not legendary. Actually, I think Master doesn't even care, because he says even if they are legendary,
Legend rule doesn't apply.
he really does everything for this deck. And then Karlach, Fury of Avernus, you don't have to just wait to make more tokens. You can just give yourself extra combats, and then when he attacks, you just keep making more things. I love it. I'm a big fan. This deck looks really cool. If you have tokens and you want to keep them, you can populate them. The new token that's populated won't have the exile it. That's just granted to the token that he makes. So you can throw Promise of Aclazotz, Song of the World Soul whenever you cast a spell you populate, and just accumulate them, and your opponents are just going to go, oh, uh-oh. I mean, there's also Wake the Reflections. Kind of a crappy card, but I do like it if you're trying to get cute with it. It's a 1-mana populate. And then Mustard the Departed, or Mustard the Departed. It's end step. You just populate it. Just make sure you have something die.
I mean, there's also that Dove that works really well. I'm happy that this commander has white in his identity, so we can actually play the good populate cards.
The only thing to note about the Dove is it's not going to do anything with Altair, because it triggers at the beginning of combat to populate unless you've already populated something else or you have the master out. If you have that, you can live the dream, but it is like a little awkward, but the rest of them just work.
But moving on to the next one, this is mono red, and it's going to hit for a lot of commander damage. It's Alexios, Deimos of Cosmos, 300 red for a 4/4 with trample. It attacks each combat if able, can't be sacrificed, and can't attack its owner. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player gains control of it, untaps it, and puts a 1/1 counter on it, and gains haste until end of turn. This has a lot of moving parts into it, but I love the fact that it can't be sacrificed. This is like a slicer, but it has trample, and I really like this. I think it has. Plus, it just gets bigger on everyone's
awesome.
turn.
It looks so cool.
This looks like a powerhouse.
It's the fact that it gives haste. I kept reading this and expecting it to go, oh, bummer, it doesn't have this. But no, it gains haste every time. It can never attack you, and they can't even sacrifice it. Those are the three main problems I would have had, but they're all not here.
And the one main problem I would have had is that you could chump block it, but it has trample.
That's
and
also true, yeah.
And it gets bigger every single time.
Yeah, Slicer is very chump blockable. This thing is not going to be, because as soon as it attacks, like you play it, then next turn, the next person's turn attacks as a 5/5, like right away. This card is super cool, and I think it might be underappreciated right now, but we want to suit him up. We want to suit up Alexios. Let's throw Lost GT on him. We always control Lost GT, even though control of our commander will change. So we'll always get the counters on it every single turn, so 4 times per turn cycle, and then we can untap lands to ramp, make him even bigger to screw somebody over and mess up their blocks. There's just so many options.
Shiny Impetus is going to be put onto this, which gives it extra stats, so it hurts your opponents for commander damage even more, and it's going to make you treasures every single time, and it's never going to come at you.
Yeah.
So it just really helps you ramp mana.
So now you get 4 treasures every turn cycle, and your opponents, how many times does this thing have to attack? Even if I'm just picturing, like, I play Alexios, I get a turn cycle, which means he attacks for 5, then 6, then 7. On my turn, I throw the goat enchantment, the impetus on it. Now he attacks for 10. Then he attacks for 11, 12, 13. Like the
With
game,
trample,
people are just dead to commander damage to this.
This is a spicy commander. Ketis Emberclaw Familiar is right at home in this deck because you're going to be hitting one person, but all the damage is going to be elsewhere. And as this gets bigger, everyone's going to be taking so much damage overall.
This is seriously really scary. If somebody plays this against me, now that I've thought about what this deck's going to look like, I am going to be terrified. This thing's going to have to die. And Strength Testing Hammer is even funnier because now it says not only is Alexios getting bigger, but you're drawing a card because he's definitely the biggest thing in play. So if you're going to try to play countermeasures, I just said if I see this, I'm going to try to kill it every chance I get. Well, that would make me, the player of Alexios, want to play all of the removal protection I can, like Bolt Bend, change the target. Bolt Bender, change the target. Will's Reversal, change the target. Deflecting Swat, change the target. None of your target stuff's going to go through, bucko. You're never going to get you're never going to lay a finger on my Alexios.
And you can't forget my favorite, Tibalt's Trickery. It's one of the only counter spells in red.
It is. I think this deck could just be a bunch of equipment, enchantments, and then you just protect the queen, and Alexios is going to do all the work for you. It's really hard to imagine that not happening. The worst case scenario I can imagine is somebody plays like a cheap Death Touch blocker, and then the 2 players will have to collude to attack the Death Touch player, and then they will block, and we'll have to maybe have some disruption for that. There are some that we'll get to like prevent blocking in general, because that's really one of the only ways left that our opponents have to interact.
I mean, even if you have a cheap Death Touch blocker, the rest of the trample is still going to bleed through to the person. It doesn't matter. Well, I mean, it's not great if he dies, but if he's 11-11, they have a 1/1 Death Touch blocker, they're still taking 10 of commander damage.
They might still be dead if they've gotten hit before, because if he's a 10/10, that means he's been growing. So if we want to talk about like ways to remove or prevent blockers, Silent Arbiter is a pretty good one. It says that only one creature can attack or block each combat. So if we give Alexios Menace, not blockable at all. If the trample works super well with this, which means chump blocks just don't work, and now you can't tag team block him with like 7/1/1s. You just have to lose one of your big creatures if you want to absorb damage.
Plus, only one creature can attack, so it's not like they can swing out with other things like at you, because this is forced to attack every combat. It's not like they have that choice.
There's also Bedlam. It's just a 4-mana enchantment. It only says creatures can't block. Let's just forget all of combat forever. Math is for attackers, not blockers anymore.
It's for the face, you just have to see how much do I have to get hit with until I die.
I feel like your opponents are going to be in situations where they have to sacrifice, like they'll be on a team against you, and they'll have to sacrifice someone because someone's going to have to take all the commander damage while the other 2 people find answers.
Yeah, I mean, I've played against Slicer, and it's nasty, and this is Slicer, but better.
It's Slicer, but like way punchier. There's also War's Toll, which says that if one creature is going to attack, all of them have to attack, and if you're going to tap your lands, you got to tap all of your lands. So figure out what you're going to do. Because now all of your creatures have to attack, which is very similar to just saying your creatures can't block. They're all going to be turned sideways.
I feel like this deck just puts everyone else at the table into like a hostage situation type deal. And they're going to be scrambling to figure it out, but no one wants to be the sacrificial lamb. So they're all going to be taking a bunch of damage. Even if this thing dies, bringing it back out, keep attacking, and you're just going to have a couple more points of commander damage before they are just dead from it.
Yeah, 4 mana is not that unreasonable. I can totally see this dying eventually because we don't have enough protection, and then we just recast it for 6 and we go, your move, gain control of him. Now he's a 5/5.
Yeah, it's your turn now to get hit.
It's your turn. So we're going to move to our next commander, which might just be the polar opposite of that, because this is the Capitoline or Capitoline Triad. 10 mana, 7/7. It's a god. I didn't even know there were gods in Assassin's Creed, but you learn something every day. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each historic card in your graveyard, and exile any number of historic cards from your graveyard with total mana value 30 or greater. You get an emblem with creatures you control have base power and toughness 9/9. This is such a weird card, but I love it. It gets the gears turning for how to build this deck. I want a bunch of historic cards. Then this thing can be like a 0 mana 7/7. And if I exile Draco or other expensive cards, I get an emblem. No one can interact with emblems. I just get 9/9s forever.
You just have to kill the player at that point.
Yeah.
I think that putting emblems on things that are not planeswalkers that you have to work 20 billion turns for, I really like that a lot.
Same. Do more of it.
I think that this should be a recurring thing.
I do too. So we want cost reduction on our commander. They're really expensive, but if we mill ourselves enough, like with a perpetual timepiece perhaps, now we can get the cost down. And I really don't know what your opponents are supposed to do. It feels like this is inevitable because I'm going to fill my graveyard. It's very hard to interact with that. And even if you do, I can just restart and fill my graveyard some more with all my cards. And then I'm going to cast my commander for like 0 mana or 2 mana or 4 mana. And then once it resolves, I'm going to exile the stuff and get the emblem, and there's no way to stop me.
It's just so fast, too. Mesmeric Orb, this is going to help you and hurt all of your opponents. It doesn't feel great to be like, oh, well, I ramped a line. I need to play a big thing. I guess I'm just going to put the top 10 into my graveyard as an opponent. But for you, that's just going to help you get to that 30 as fast as possible.
Yeah, you're only going to need 14, maybe 15 cards in your graveyard before you've just got it, because that's just how this deck's going to be built. It that Heralds the End even works, because it's a colorless spell that costs a bunch of mana, so you can reduce the Triad and cast them even cheaper. Lastly, I have to shout out my favorite historic cards that go to the graveyard very, very easily, Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble. They're not going to contribute to the mana value that the Triad wants, but they are literally like free. They're basically just air in your deck that puts more historic cards in the graveyard and makes your commander cheaper.
I mean, plus it's just BZ's favorite turn 1 play in general.
I love playing Mishra's Bauble. Playing Mishra's Bauble before you play your first land feels pretty dope. I'm not going to lie.
Plus BZ just going, bauble.
Bauble, that's what I always say. All right, how about some high mana value cards that we can pitch or mill over to make this 30 feel a lot easier?
There are a lot of high mana value artifacts and just historic stuff in general we can put into the graveyard. One of them is Mycosynth Golem. Usually this will give affinity to artifacts, but that 11 will help us get more than a third of the way to 30.
Plus, if we draw it, it's castable. It has affinity for artifacts, so it's not that hard to play. Draco costs 16. Who cares what it does? It's historic and it costs 16. Get in the deck. Cityscape Leveler works from the graveyard. Costs 8, so we can mess around with, do I want to unearth it and kill something that's really annoying me, or do I just want to use it as 8 out of 30 mana value to make that emblem?
And Emrakul the Promised End. This is chunky, but if you can cast it, I mean, taking someone's turn never hurt anyone but them.
Plus it costs 13, and it's historic because legendaries are historic, so you got, what, Draco's 16, Emrakul's 13, that's 29 already. And you just need basically one other spell, and you've already got your emblem, and you don't need to get the emblem multiple times. It doesn't do anything. As soon as you get it once, you can just laugh at your opponents and say, stop me now, fools, you can't do it.
Yeah, because anything you have, well, my creatures are probably bigger.
However, the last piece of this puzzle is you actually want creatures that are going to be good when you make them into 9/9s. We can't just play all of the giant creatures because they're all bigger than that. We want to play little creatures. Then by the time we get the emblem, your opponents realize they can't ever beat you because you have a bunch of tokens from like Kozilek's Command. It's a card that like will replace itself or exile something, but it gives you X spawn tokens.
I know that has been shooting up in price recently too, but this is a great home for it. Usually the colorless just like interaction in general isn't the best, but I do like it here.
Yeah, it's good, and it just end step make 5 spawns, and oops, they're 9/9s.
Glaring Fleshraker is also going to help you get those spawns in here because you're just going to be playing the game, casting spells, getting spawns, cast another spell, get a spawn. I mean, that's casting your Urza's Bauble and your Mishra's Bauble is going to be mana positive with this.
Oh yeah, Threefold Thunder Hulk is a expensive historic creature, but also makes a bunch of little tokens. So when they become 9/9s, if we draw this in the late game, our opponents are still in trouble because we have a 12/12 and a bunch of 9/9s. And Mirror Battlesphere, kind of the same thing. We can use it in a graveyard because it costs 7, or we can tap out for it later and make 5 9/9s. Is that good? 45 power for 7 mana? I think that's pretty good.
I think it's okay. I do like the fact that it's dual use in this.
Yeah, there's also Canoptech Scarab Swarm. You can exile someone's graveyard, and for each creature among that, you get a 1/1 insect, which, of course, with this deck is going to basically be guaranteed as a 9/9 insect for that many times.
And who can forget everyone's favorite colorless land that makes creatures?
Tell me it doesn't go in this deck.
Field of the Dead.
Tell me you don't put Field of the Dead in this deck to make a bunch of tokens. If Field of the Dead made 9/9s, do you know how happy I would be? I'd be so happy. I might build this deck. This deck looks cool.
I mean, you have the Reliquary Towers. You have enough colorless lands in here where I think you can just make it so that Field of the Dead actually is on, and you don't have to just have like waste and snow-covered wastes and just keep that as your base.
This might have to be built. I don't know. If you see me a couple of weeks from now, a couple of months from now, I might have a Triad deck. That could be really,
and it's because
cool.
of Field of the Dead.
Absolutely. If you want to see us review other Magic the Gathering cards, like maybe the cards you should buy this month, how about right here?